Uh, I want to start by saying that Francois and I talked about this, and he said, what should we call this session? And I kept saying it should be called Hardscapes for Dummies, because it kind of is, but that, I think, doesn't diminish its value to everybody who wishes to learn about it and use it. It's only to say that this is really intended to be a lessons learned and a practical guide, and what the power of this tool can do in really a kind of blue collar way, which is to say, you're a working person, I'm a working person who is facing with the real challenges of getting this thing to behave for me and be of service. And so that's really what I wanted to show you today, and also to say that one thing I noticed in the documentation on Hardscape is a lot of emphasis on the assembly of a hardscape construction. So a base slab, gravel subslab, mortar, then stone or brick, and that kind of thing. This will not cover that. I don't personally find that to be of that much value to where I am in what I need this tool for right now. What I mainly need it for is to get the grades to work with the complexity of actual sites. And so that's what we're up to today. So let me start by showing you a couple of projects that we did prior to using Hardscape. Starting with me taking on the screen, but let me get something up there for you to look at before I do that, so you're not looking at awful stuff. Okay, so here we are, and this is the long center, and the long center, we all know the long center, and a few years back they were interested in optimizing their site, not necessarily the internal workings of the building, but the site itself. They host about 100 free events every year, and they were wondering about the possibility of making more of those revenue generators, and just wondering what the possibilities were for them. So we were subconsultants to a landscape group and did a number of studies on what some possibilities would be. And this is the point for this group, because this is such a distant view of the problem, really getting specific about grades isn't really an issue. And you can see as we flick through these that there really are, you can get there's a lot of power to be found just in using extrudes and slabs or floors and those simple tools. All these dots are simply extrusions on top of the paving, very crude, very simple, but still for planning purposes, perfectly acceptable, and you might even argue powerful, even to the extent that this topography was built the old-fashioned architecture school way, where we just extruded layers up and didn't really want to get into any kind of funniness associated with creating a site model. And part of this is my personal aversion to things that are a little bit tricky. And part of it is just because it's really simple to build topography this way. But at any rate, there's an example of what you can do without the Hardscape tool. Now let's look at another one. that is a proposal unbuilt for the Black Bear restaurant out in West Texas. And in this case, we're mostly focusing on this historic building, but you can start to see the limitations of not using the hardscape tool here. You'll notice that the bottom riser on that stair sticks out of the ground a little bit. There's a little shadow underneath it. And you'll notice that there's a contour which may or may not be where the curb is. And so we're starting to really sense the edge of the capability of this tool. You can see behind that black tree on the left that we're even using built-up layers for the road behind the building, staying with. And here you can see this is a plaza, and there is no step in this plaza, but because we didn't have the hardscape tool, we just are living with the depiction of a step, even though there isn't one. And so those are some examples of how when you're at a certain scale, you can get away with not using that tool. Now, let's look at a more recent situation for us. And that is this. So we have been tasked with, we're working on a project right now that is intended to combine two library buildings for the city of Austin. And right down the middle, separating the two buildings, is this parking lot. And in an early part of our scope, there was an idea of creating a plaza at the Guadalupe Street side, which is at the end of this parking lot. And let me move to a different photograph, and I'm going to come back to this one in just a second, but let me move to a different photograph to show you. Okay, so there it is from Guadalupe. And you can see that if there were a plaza there instead of this parking lot, perhaps that plaza could be used to bind these two separate buildings, but adjacent buildings, into one unified cultural destination. And that was the idea behind this plaza. But this really is a place where not using the hardscape tool just wouldn't work at all. And notice, for instance, in the Austin History Center, the historic building on the right, there's a set of steps, and then there's a ramp. And then further in front of the ramp, there's this underground utility vault. And notice also that the street and the curb line slopes from high on the right to low on the left, or maybe it's the other way around, I can't remember. And then further, there are accessible parking spaces. Those have very specific grading requirements. And then to make matters even more complicated, the entry floor of the History Center is at a different elevation than the entry floor of the Falk. And further, there was an interest in using rear doors, which are in this photograph. And there's a rear door in the History Center right here. And then there's a need to punch a rear door in the Falk over here, all of which makes for a very complicated situation. So we dealt with that. And let me just kind of show you what that looks like, what some of that looks like anyway. And these are PDFs, and I'll show you these, and then I will open the Vectorworks file itself, and we'll go through and just kind of open up the hood and look at it. little tiny curbs, little steps, little bits of grass. There's the door on the left, which is right here going into the fog. We're creating a new door on the right. Back here, this is a curious thing, but back here is the accessible parking. Well, gosh, if you put that in there, it needs to work to these rear doors. It needs to ramp up to the plaza itself. We need an accessible way to get into the History Center on the left and the fog on the right. Gee, the challenges just keep coming. And so before we leave this, and again, these are PDFs, and I'll show you another version of this, but these are PDFs. One thing I want to reference a little later, but I'll mention it now because it's so visible in this image. And that is that with the Hardscape tool, you can model components of your hardscape and then knit them together after you finish. And one really good example of that is the deck for accessible parking. And we all know that accessible parking usually comes in pairs with this access aisle in between. And we further know that the deck can't slope any more than 2% in any one direction. So being able to model that and know where that is going to sit relative to various other constraints on your site can be an important and a really powerful way to start to understand what you're going to need, as opposed to, say, getting on a model and saying, well, let's see, 2%, let me get my calculator out. And if I start here at this and I go over here to that, I guess that's a little bit less, fiddling around with it that way. This is a very graphic, simple way to do it. So this dark thing right here is just such a deck. And because this is very much a conceptual model, we didn't fully get all of that resolved, but we certainly understood the basic challenge and that we got very much within the zone on that basic challenge. And so let me just show you one more, just because, doggone it, we're proud of it. But I'm teasing a little bit. But here's the other thing. I just want to say this too. And these are not really going to be built. They've not been excluded from the scope of this project. Even so, it's generally not great sportsmanship to show design ideas prior to showing them to the public. And the only reason I'm showing it to this group is I know I can trust everybody on this call to not ever tell anybody that you saw this stuff. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way. And this little kidney shaped grass piece is a hardscape trimmed and then elevated an inch or so above the plaza level so that we can all look at it. Okay, so that's that. Now let's look at Vectorworks. That's what we're here to talk about, right? And let's see how we got there. And I'm going to start by showing a file that I just started to illustrate some of the basic workings of the Hardscape tool. So the first thing is just make any shape and then go to AEC and create objects from shape. Just do that and create a hardscape. Boom, there you go. And you want it to be 3D, and there are various types and you can change them later. But let's start with a line slab for no particular reason, okay? And in fact, I'm going to change it and say, no, I'm not. I'm going to go to line slab. Do you want to change it? Yes, I want to change it. And what we want is to find a way to get a slope on these. Excuse me. I thought I knew this stuff backwards and forwards, and I keep learning as I go. And I need one of these allows me to slope the slab, give it a slope. And Francois probably knows this by heart, and I keep looking, I don't see it. I'm very sorry. Oh. I literally cannot find it. But let's go on, and let's just say, here's one that's slab that is an aligned slab. And a couple things to note about this is slabs will align with a lot of different things, including walls and floors and the like. And that's good if you happen to want to align to that wall. This blue thing is a wall where the slab wants you to align. But another thing you can do with these slabs is add a profile. And you can do that with this aligned slab configuration. You can't do this if you change it to some of the other configurations, but the aligned slab configuration allows you to slope this. So let me just show you what that looks like in 3D. And you can see that it is sloped. It has a 2D representation below, but it slopes. Now let's put another profile on it right here at the bottom of the OI palette, add profile. And then let's edit the profile. And so it's 6 inches there. And let's just say we want this to be 6 inches there. We want this profile to be level. And of course I edited the wrong profile, but it doesn't really matter for the purpose of this. And you can see that you can start warping things by using these profiles. So the profile I have that's 6 inches high here and 6 inches high here defines that line. And then along this edge, I was able to drop it 6 inches because I had another profile. And you can adjust these. And of course, they're numbered here. This one is numbered 1. This one down here is numbered 2, and so forth. So, and helpfully, it gives you the percent slope. So imagine, if you would, you're trying to design a parking deck for accessible parking. You could use this very technique, and I would know that, well, this isn't working yet. It's 5.275% slope. No good. So then let's take a look at this slab here, which is a drainage slab. And let's look at it, reference to this wall. And let's make that an aligned slab. And notice that it aligns automatically with the bottom of the wall. And so you can get these things to spot elevations if you are aligning things to the bottom of the wall, or to various elements within Vectorworks. Now, let's go back with this and add a profile.
Al, can you align either the top or the bottom of the slab with the wall?
Hang on a second, Don. I'm going to answer that very thing here in just a second. Let me do this first. And let's just take this guy, and you've got one of these vertex button deals. So let's go to this one. You see how it's blinking that little dot? I pointed with my finger, Don. I know you didn't see. So you have this vertex only thing right here. And which one is it? Well, if you blink the one in the middle, it'll flash it. And then it'll tell you that you can edit that one. And then let's edit the other one. Oh, excuse me. What's going on here? I need the, there we go. That's the one I need to zero. Command 5. And now you can see that I have aligned the bottom of it to the bottom of the wall, and I've aligned the top of it with a profile. I've created the elevation at the top with a profile. And then the other thing you can do, and let me just say, in the general answer to your question, Don, is I think I have found that the tool is really stubborn, and it really wants to do this kind of sucking the hardscape to these various elements in a very particular way, and it doesn't have full capability. Maybe those who know the tool better than I would disagree with me. But again, this is Hardscape for dummies. We're just trying to get started here and make this thing usable, and not necessarily becoming a full expert.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, Francois wants to break in and disagree with me already because he's not a dummy. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, so I don't know the Hardscape tool, but if can you click on the button that says main slab components?
Yeah.
Which is the very thing you wanted to avoid.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you see how there's that little arrow there under datum? So click on that, and that'll now align to the bottom of the slab. And there you go.
See, I'm such a dummy. I didn't know that. And so I learned that right now. But here's the other thing.
Yeah. So if you had multiple components, you could specify which component the would align itself to the other geometry, the wall or the profile or whatever, and whether you wanted to align to the top of that component or the bottom of that component. So
that might actually be a really good thing to know in terms of there may be situations where you could align it to a component and then turn that component off. That might be actually helpful too. But and so
that's interesting. So you could even have a component that was just a virtual component in some sort of an invisible class that's just like a guide or a non-plot, and that's just what you use as your kind of alignment reference.
And and I found myself having to do that very thing a couple of times to trick the hardscape into aligning to something that I didn't necessarily want to show. But this alignment to a wall is, to me, problematic. Now let's try something else, because I tried something and I showed it to Vectorworks and they said, hey, you got this to work, and we never were able to get that to work. So let's try, let me show you something that maybe.
Well, I'm dying for you to reshape the bottom of that wall and see what happens.
Yeah, well, I'll do that in a minute, because one thing I actually did, which add a new profile, okay, edit the profile, and let's just make this 24 and go to the next vertex and make it 24. Okay. Now what? Anything? Didn't work. It did not work. So the time you know what happened? I'm sorry. It says edit profile, and I need to edit profile number 2. And let me make sure that I can't tell where this, I think it is it. So let's go 24. And it's a little tricky in terms of making sure you're editing the right profile. And as I see, here's the little button right here. So you can go from profile 1 to profile 2. So I can, I guess, select one of these profiles or the other. But at any rate, what we want to do is see if that worked. And look at that. It did work. So I was able to override its stubborn tendency to suck itself to the bottom of that wall by adding a profile on that edge. And then the other thing that these do is they will align with each other. So let's try this, okay? And that's just a regular old slab modifier, but let's just see if we can make it an aligned slab. And I'm sure I'm doing something wrong. But there's a way to get these to align with each other. I find this drainage one not to be very helpful, usually, slab drainage. And there's a realign button that should do something. It should turn into red. And this is not working at the moment. So let's just, oh, here it is. It will never align if it's not coplanar with the edge. So it was kind of a housekeeping error on my part. Okay. Now look at that bright red line of that note right there. It says realign. Let's see what happens. Whoa, look at that. So that's the other thing that slabs will do. So you get them to line up with each other. And so what I did in this model that I made of those plazas is I broke it down into manageable chunks. So I didn't attempt to use one hardscape to model the whole plaza and the sidewalks in front of each building and wrap it around the corner. And instead, I made manageable chunks and then knitted them together with this realign concept here. And so those are the basic. Go ahead.
Are you able to, in others, instead of making lots of individual slabs, are you able to add a profile in the midsection of a slab so it becomes bent or warped as opposed to putting a profile along the edge or corner?
Well, let me just show you that real quick. Let me answer it by showing it to you. Okay, so here we go. And AEC, create objects from shape, turn it into a hardscape. Yes. Say it's an aligned slab. Don't care about that. And so here we have we're going to add a profile here. Okay, and that is 0, 0. And then let's add another profile like this. And that's profile number 2. So check this out. This is pretty cool. Notice under the profiles, and I've forgotten about this, one of the things that is a real problem for me when I don't work on tools, I forget. But this little button right here, Hardscape Profiles, you can scroll through various profiles. I go back, I'm in profile 1, over here I'm on profile 2. So I want profile 2. Edit profile. And let's just take that button and make it -12. How about that? And let's just change that a little bit and make it more vivid. Just, okay, because I know that's probably not as, okay. And then let's make a profile, add a profile number 3. And I'm going to edit profile 3 by going to this button right here, edit. And I want to make that one 0. Look at that.
Okay.
And I don't know what that, I'm sure there's a button that will get rid of that rectangle, but yes, I do not. It's probably show profile line, show slope, show. I'm sure there's something that line represents something. I don't know what it is right now. But at any rate, there you go. So it's perfectly level all the way around in 3 sides, right? And then it dips right there. And that really, to be honest with you, that right there is what I was looking for in this profile as a capability that I didn't have any other way other than this tool. And so, and there is a way to get these to actually align, as we saw here, over here, to other warped shapes so that you can really make your model as dynamic and complex as the site itself. And that has always been the limitation of that old simple technique of just extruding cardboard layers, as we did in architecture school, if you're old enough to have made models out of cardboard.
So Al, when you stitch these together and you render them, do the stitch lines disappear pretty well, or do you still see those?
Well, there's a stitch line right there. And I'd say the answer is no.
Yeah, but in your those renderings, that looked pretty clean. Would you see those renderings, or?
Well, how about we go to the renderings? Would you like to open the Vectorworks file and look at that? How would that be?
All right. Got it right there, looks like.
As if by magic.
And
Okay.
Al, I had a question too. So can you, on the profiles, can you do it by percent slope as opposed to an actual numeric inches or whatever?
Let's try that. And you know what I would say, that's really kind of a cool thing to do, and we're going to edit. We have profile here. Let's just add a percent. Can we do that? Hang on a sec, please. It keeps showing me what it is, but it isn't allowing me to, just give me a second, please. I keep trying to select a profile. And so let me edit this profile, see if I can get it to say yes. And it keeps, I don't know why it's not Just a second, please.
Al, do you see where, when go to edit the profile?
Yeah, okay.
Click on that little, click on that, well, click on the blue tab so you know which profile you're, the little blue arrow. Right there.
Click there.
Yep.
Well, I've been doing that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, edit the profile that way.
Just hit right there.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And
then
then,
do you see where it says grade definition is ratio?
yeah, and I kept saying, okay, give me a bunch of different things. And does this allow me to then put it in there? I don't see a box that allows me to change that.
Go ahead.
That's what I'm looking for,
Yeah,
is a
you
box on the OI palette that allows me to adjust. That's what Don is asking about. And
Can you
just
type
click on the percentage.
yourself?
say
Make that
again, grade and percent right there. Okay,
No,
so
click on the 0.00.
Yeah, double click on that.
yeah, I am, but I have the hand tool and I can't seem to get out of the hand tool.
Can you go to the arrows and move?
Oh, there.
Yeah.
Let's try that. It only hits
See
the
the endpoint.
corner. Oh, hang on just a second. Let's see what else we got here. Corner vertex. Yeah, it will only do that. So I would say the answer to your question is maybe, but you need somebody who's not a dummy to do that, I guess. But you can certainly dial it in by, just changing things. Oh, well, that's too much slope. Oh, there, that's under 2%, and so forth. There's probably a more sophisticated way to do it, but I can't do it at the moment. I thought I would be able to do it, but apparently the answer provisionally is no.
And I also want to point out that profile does not have to be a straight line.
This profile.
Yeah, any profile doesn't have to be a straight line.
So let's try that.
If you just go to that profile and edit it, yeah, you can just add vertices, change them like any polyline.
Edit profile.
Mm-hmm. So do you see that palette of tools up at the top there?
Reshape. Let's add one. Right. And so you can do that within the profile. Now, the point about all this, though, is
you can also make those curves. They don't have to be angles, right? You could make
correct. But the point also is that in plan, it's always going to be a straight line. But yes, you can do this and really get as complicated as you may wish to get. And what I have found is that it's easy to get into a situation where the capability of the tool is more complicated than I can keep up with. And part of it is I'm not, really well versed in it. Part of it is I don't use the tool all that often. But also part of it is, I believe, the tool itself is inherently pretty complicated. And further, some of the things that the tool doesn't need to be that complicated with, it is. In other words, the tool could use some tuning to make it more user-friendly. For instance, this idea of creating a kind of wall in an invisible class, to use one example, so that you can get the hardscape to align to that and then turn off that class. That's okay. And maybe that's the final idea for how to perform that particular operation, but it feels a little clunky to have to do that. And so one wishes that it would be more responsive and easier, honestly, just plain easier. But the purpose of this meeting is to say, even though this tool may not be perfect for all of us, it's still pretty good. And even as I fiddle around with, and with these very basic things that I'm showing, you can get it to do a lot of different things. The other thing regarding workarounds, and I'll call them workarounds, is if you found yourself in a situation where you have a lot of walls and you have a lot of hardscapes right up against walls, and you found yourself fighting against its tendency to want to just align with the bottom of that wall, you could put the hardscapes on a different layer and have them operate independently of that wall. That's another thing you could do. And all of these ideas are workable, but they get more cumbersome the more complicated your process is. And I'll just say, from our particular standpoint, we tend to do lots of iterations. And so we might, this plaza isn't even really a good example because we only have 3 versions of it so far, but we do plan version 7, plan version 8. And if we're doing that many plans and we're doing that many hardscapes, that just becomes a lot of housekeeping in terms of the internal organization of your Vectorworks file. It sure would be nice if you didn't have to do that kind of stuff. If, on the other hand, you're doing a 1-story residence on a relatively open lot and the considerations aren't that complicated, then you don't even need to ask Vectorworks to tune up the tool. You're there. Anyhow, are there any other questions from anybody prior to me moving to the file itself?
I was just thinking that this tool, isn't it designed specifically to marry to a contour map? Whatever site model you have or contour lines, I'm assuming you say, like, for example, you're doing a path or a driveway, the idea being you can marry the bottom of the slab to the contour lines and adjust it that way, so that your profiles are basically along the contour lines, but at the same time creating a constructible slab that makes sense, as opposed to this incredibly difficult, warped, faceted piece of concrete. So the tool, to me, is simplifying it so it makes it constructible, but gives you the capacity to align aspects of that slab with the site model, because that's kind of what's happening with a slab on grade if it's not going to be level, like a driveway. So I've not used this tool, but my assumption is that would be one of the things you could do with it. And conversely, of course, you want to make a plaza, and stepping it up, you just raise the whole thing out of the ground, but you know how much you're raising it from the contour model.
Well, I don't know whether it. I'm gonna make a statement which may not be a response to exactly what you said, but you inspired me to make this statement. The contour, the hardscape tool may not automatically align with contours in a site model. I don't know that that is true or not true.
I mean, automatically. I mean, you have to do it
Right.
manually, but
yes, but that is but as a practical matter, that what you said is true. That is what we're trying to do, and so you're using really a sophisticated version of a flat slab. You're just able to warp the slab in ways that real sidewalks, real streets, real curbs, real stairs warp, and as opposed to working with the digital terrain model, which doesn't really seem really apropos to this kind of task. Before we go one more round with the, and I show you the model, let me show you something else that this can do. Speaking of walks and so forth. So let's take a shape like that and create a hardscape. And let's call it a line slab. And then we're going to add a few profiles. I undid my slab. Add profile. And then you can really tune the grading. And I'm using a faceted piece, but so let's just march. There's profile number one. We don't want to modify that. That's good.
So
Let's
would
go to
this be if you're trying to create like a 2% cross slope on a sidewalk?
Correct. That's exactly what I'm wanting to show. So over here, this is profile number 3. That's the one we want to have. Well, we want this one to be negative 3. And then this one to be negative 4. And because we want it, somebody said 2% cross slope, so let's just make it 5. Look at that, okay? And so we can do that. And of course I did it, I guess, sort of backwards, but let's see if it's even detectable. It is detectable a little bit. But yeah, you can dial these roads in, and they don't need and it can fade down on the inside and rise up on the outside as you may wish it to do. So, and it works perfectly fine also with curved shapes. And I think what the Vectorworks people were doing is they like to do these profiles on something like this by starting way outboard. And well, they did that and it worked and it stayed outboard. In this case, it sucks to the edge of the hardscape. But at any rate, I think you understand the basic idea of that you can have curved roads where the inside is lower than the outside. And that's kind of a nice thing. The final thing to say is I think that what was helpful to me was to just kind of have this, what I'll call it kind of a skunkworks kind of file like the one you see right here, open as I was working on the actual project. And when I bump into something that seemed complicated or I didn't quite know what to do, I would come over here to this skunkworks thing and create a really simple example like the examples I've been creating here in front of you. And that would help me to understand better how to proceed. And that limited the potential damage I could do. And you should trust me when I tell you I can do lots of damage to my active file. So I tried not to, that was a helpful thing for me.
Hey, Al, before you go to that file, could you try
Yeah.
that? Can you go back to your skunkworks?
Yeah. Yeah, here we go. What would you like me to do?
Could you go to that slab that's by the blue wall and reshape the blue wall?
Yeah, oh, of course.
Go to a
Yeah.
3D view and just use the reshape to shape the bottom of the blue wall.
Yeah.
You might need
So-
to delete the profile that's along the wall.
Yeah,
first.
hang on a second. So I have the bottom of the wall at negative 12 inches, but let me make it negative 24 inches. And then because you asked, I'm going to do
Oh,
this.
you don't need to, just realign it.
Well, actually, I think you were wanting me to delete. Okay, so here's
I know,
delete
but that's
profile.
before I saw that it was red.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, can you go to an ISO view and then realign
Yeah.
it?
And realign.
Well, yeah,
And
so it looks like the profile is going to override the wall that it's aligned to.
Correct. And that just is
Important to know like what overrides what.
right. That's really important because, you know, when I'm designing buildings and building models of buildings, aligning the bottom of a wall with the hardscape from the standpoint of creating the model of the building itself is way down on my list of priorities. In fact, it's not even a priority. And I would never establish the bottom of a wall just because that's where a hardscape wanted to hit it. So there needs to be a workaround. And then of course the other—
No, it's the other way around. The hardscape aligns to the wall.
That's what I meant, yeah. But
you could imagine a situation where you had some walls, for example, and you fit the walls to the bottom to meet the site model, for example. Use the fit walls to object, and the bottom of the wall follows the site model. And then you've got a hardscape that's aligned to the wall, and presto. Back to Bill's point about the hardscape sort of, you know, marrying up with the site.
indeed.
Anyway, I'd be curious for you to delete that edge profile that's up against the wall and see what happens.
Well, let's just do that.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And right down at the very bottom of the OI palette says delete profile. And this is profile number 2. And it says so right here that I'm going to influence profile number 2. There it is. It goes away. Let's go back to 7 and look at that. It immediately obeyed the wall itself. Now, the other thing—
Can you humor me and double click on the wall?
Yeah.
And then see that
I know what you're going to
blue
want. I know where you're going with this, Francois. You're going to want me to do that, aren't you?
I am.
Okay. Why do I know these things?
And now add a vertex to the bottom of the wall.
Let's see what we can do here. Did I
That's
add
the
one?
that's the wall height. You got to start from the corner.
Okay. Let's see what happened. You can't get any cleaner than that. You really can't.
I'm just pointing
well,
this
yes,
out
you
because—
could. Look at that. Look at that. I'm really mad now because it isn't catching that.
Yeah.
That is a huge disappointment. I have to tell everybody.
Well,
I'm
I
gonna
think
report that.
Al, what this tells us is
Yeah.
you need to go take some coding classes at ATC so that you can straighten out those poor guys in Columbia, Maryland.
Seriously, those guys are slackers.
No,
But—
for those of us who are familiar with walls and comfortable with sculpting them with the reshape tool, this is really awesome because now you can do all sorts of cool things with your hardscape. And
Now, all you have to do is create another profile, which aligns his ending at the kink in the wall.
Exactly so. Yeah, and that would work. That would solve it right there. You'd have to create a profile. And because it was bothering me, I just changed the bottom shape of the wall itself. But
all right, thanks for humoring me, Al. Appreciate it.
yeah, that's what we're here for. So anyway, we're not quite running out of time, but if you like, I can show you the model. But this is so much fun, we can just stay right here if everybody would like to.
No, show us the model.
Oh, before we go to the model, I want to say one other thing about these hardscapes. And that is that it's very important that your layer plane be set, your layer height, design layer height be set at 0. And I will just say that I was working on a project that was 550 some feet above sea level. And I thought, I'm going to be clever and I'm going to set my elevation height at 500 feet. And then instead of my elements always coming in 500 feet below where I need them, gee, they'll be, easier to find. And what it does is it totally messes up your its ability to do calculations. And so don't ever change that. Even if you're working on in Nepal, keep it at 0 is what I've learned. And I want to just see if I can try one other thing and hope to be successful here this time. There we go. Okay. So here's a hardscape that is called slab modifier top. And notice where it says slope def, which means slope definition. Okay. So you can give that various angles. So here we go. Here we have an angle. So this is another way to, and this is a pretty important tool in the toolkit. And so let's just go ahead and give this 3% slope, okay? And then let's also give it an elevation at, give it an elevation, which I did right here. And then notice that it calculates what the elevation is at the bottom of the slab right here. And that's the kind of thing that gets all messed up if you change the design layer elevation to anything other than 0. But this is really great for anything to do with ramps and the like.
Well, this answers the question we were trying to do before about controlling it by the slope percent.
Well, you can if it's a slab modifier, but notice that that's a slab. This one's a slab modifier. This one down here is an aligned slab. This one over here is an aligned slab. And with the slab modifier, you get to do this thing with the slope like that. But notice you don't get to add a profile, okay? So on this one, a line slab, right down here, you see everything to do with profiles, hardscape profiles right there. And so you get to do this business with a line slab, and you get to do only this business with slab modifier. So one would likely be inclined to use a combination. But this is, if you're doing a ramp, can it get any simpler than that? Now, the other thing about this is you could have one end lower than the other, and it could be somewhat warped, and you can do this kind of thing. With that tool, but in every instance, this thing where it says slab modifier, that's always going to be a slope, but otherwise flat slab.
Right, so it's pretty, all right, so there's a main distinction when you have an aligned slab, you're basically taking the slab and aligning it to something that you want to align it to. But if you're using a modifier, it means we're creating a slab with specific intent, like percent slope.
Correct.
And that's more important, and then we'll marry that to whatever we want to later by
Right.
elevating one side or one corner to the other to match what we needed to match.
Right. And then, right. And then with this guy right here, it is so cool that it also has the slope, and you can also add profiles, even if you don't intend to modify it, you just to show what the slope is.
Oh,
And there's a slope, you see? And then you can delete it if you don't like it. Did you guys see that?
yeah, that's
So-
cool.
Yeah. So anyway, anything else, Francois? You have any other break the tool suggestions? I mean, that I got into this skunkworks thing saying, how can I break this tool? And I found there were a couple of ways to do it, but mostly it works. It just does what it's advertised to do.
What if you were, how do you do surfaces like adding a pavers, or do you put that in the slab or on top of the slab or pattern or?
Yeah,
The
well,
component of the
that's
slab.
a whole thing having to do with components.
It is component.
And let me see where, okay. So you'd add components here, just like you do with a wall. Okay. And you build it up, and you can do that. And the other thing that the tutorials spend a lot of time showing you is how you can put brick borders, and you can make different kinds of brick borders, and it can be contrasting colors to the main central pattern within the body of the hardscape, and you can get it to do all these various things, none of which of very much interest to me. But if you're just doing, garden or patio design, it would be pretty handy. But this right here is the part that is just so. This is the game changer and makes this a usable and really important, and in some cases, as you saw with this 2 libraries project, an indispensable tool.
I will say that with respect to all the components and so forth, I've used the Hardscape tool for to model a wood deck, where I want the deck to have sort of an edge board, right? And so I'll create a quote brick pattern that is dimensional lumber for the infill, the quote paved area, and also for the border. And you can even give them different thicknesses so that you've got like a little turn down board at the edge and so forth. So, you can get creative with that stuff.
And that's, I would regard all of that stuff. This is me personally talking. I would regard all of that stuff as Hardscape's 2.0. This is really Hardscape's 1.0. And I will just say that I'm delighted to have this tool at my disposal, even at the 1.0 level.
Al, on the slab that you created on the lower left-hand side,
This
where
one?
it shows, it looks like that little rectangular area where it's above the base of the slab. Is that actually a hybrid object where there is a 2D and a 3D aspect of it?
I don't know what that is. And
Try just dragging the slab to see if it leaves something behind. I think it's just a rectangle.
oh, that's what it is. Yeah.
It's just a rectangle.
It's the oh, that's what it is. It's the rectangle I used to create the slab. It just, when I created it, it just left it over.
Right, because I
There's-
saw that. on
So
the-
let me just do another one and see if I can recreate that behavior. So create a hardscape, and you see it says delete source shapes. If I'd have hit that button right there, it said delete source shapes, then that rectangle would have disappeared when I made the hardscape, and I just didn't. And I'll say one thing to this assembled group, and that and I say this to Francois all the time, which is, it's always a button. There's a button somewhere that I don't know about or I hadn't overlooked. And if I just knew about it, these odd behaviors wouldn't keep happening to me. And there's another example of a button.
I have one quick basic question.
Yeah,
Where is the Hardscape tool? How did you find it?
great. Command 5, let me just say right here. So you start with any shape.
Right.
And I always like the rectangle tool because it's, just the easiest shape to make. And then go to AEC and go right here, create objects from shapes. And this is actually a good thing to know about if you don't use it, because you can make all kinds of stuff, including a ceiling grid. I never thought I'd need a ceiling grid, but the other day I kind of needed one. Grid lines, we've been starting to make use grid lines, and all these various things. But in this case, we're interested in the hardscape. Let's just for a moment, just make it a revision cloud, just for the heck of it. But you didn't like a revision cloud. You really want to see a hardscape, don't you? So let's just make it a hardscape. And now it is one. And it is a slab modifier. And you can see that I could give it a slope. And because we're here talking, I'm going to give it a 10% slope. And it's just going to go that way. And there it is. And look at that. I forgot again to hit the button. So anyway, do you want to get under the hood for a minute and look at the file, or stay here and re-edit the bottoms of walls or what have you? I'll show you the file. How's that sound? Oh, here's something that you can see that I have massing things, ramps, the plaza itself, and sidewalks all in separate layers. And I honestly don't recall why I did that, but I'm sure it was for reasons that we just were talking about.
So now you're using layers rather than stories on this, just because you're really just working on the.
This is, yeah, right. This is these building models are stage sets. This is not anything architectural. This is just stage sets as backdrops for this plaza investigation. But and so the reason to create these various layers is so that partially to just organize things, but also partially to keep things from inadvertently interacting with things that I don't want it to interact with. So let's just see what this layer is by saying active layer only. Okay, so this is plaza ramps. And so here's the case of this ramp system that was important to me for reasons I honestly can't remember, but to keep them from inadvertently interacting with other stuff. So for instance, in some of these ramps, there's a little half wall next to the ramp. And, did I really want to put profiles on both sides of this ramp just to keep it from trying to adhere to that wall? Answer, no, I did not. And then here's another thing that we did use the floor tool to create a lot of, because floors are flat, create a lot of grassed areas. And in this case, over here, I used a 3D polygon. Pardon me. You don't want to see that. 3D polygon to dial in the various reference points in corners so that the grass looks like grass. It's just a polygon. And it, again, is at the conceptual design level, it makes it so the project looks more finished and doesn't confuse an unsophisticated viewer who would otherwise see the bottom of one of these little perimeter curves and think, what the heck is that? You're not going to dig a big hole there, are you? So that's a little bit of a workaround. But let's go to go to the sidewalks. There are the sidewalks. And so there's one hardscape. There's another, there's another, there's another, and all the way around the building. And this, and notice that this one here is an aligned slab. They're all aligned slabs. Probably not all of them, but all of them, yeah. And then that guy, aligned slab, all the way around the building. And then you can hit realign, and you're off and running. And then let's go to another. Is there another massing stuff? What is that? Oh, stuff. So that's just the goodies associated with this particular iteration. And so there's this is a wall, and significantly, we didn't want the ramp next to this wall to adhere to this wall. So we moved it to a different layer. And then here is a hardscape. And goodness, I have that one shown as a slab. A 3D type is a slab. I forgot about that. Yes, you can just make it a regular old everyday slab. And this allows you to give it those slopes. So downward grade. And this is very much that deck for accessible parking. So these ramps would otherwise be trying to adhere to that landscape wall. And then somewhere right in here, oh, I wanted to make a step down from this, wanted to come down this ramp. You come down from the door of the east, of the east door of the History Center to a landing, and then you turn again and to ramp all the way down to the plaza level. But I also wanted a place for ambulatory people to maybe take a shortcut and just take 2 steps up and then use the ramp to get up from the plaza to that east door. And I seem to recall having to create an invisible object to keep this hardscape here from adhering to that floor. And this then, notice it, well, maybe floors don't have that behavior because this is a floor as opposed to a wall. And this is a hardscape. Anyway, this is getting kind of into the housekeeping of it all. Only to say that I think they adhere to stairs too, if I'm not mistaken. Only to say that this dividing things into various layers was a way to get this whole thing to behave and make this project more, make the elements of working on the project more manageable. Anyway, is there anything else anyone might wish for me to talk about while we have this model open?
So Al, you're starting with obviously a survey.
Yeah,
And so obviously on your site, you can manipulate things up and down as much as you want, but like the curb and gutter, you're starting with that as a benchmark to say we need to tie into the existing sidewalk.
yeah. I created a curb somewhere. Let's see if I can find the sidewalks. Oh, there's sidewalks right there. And let's just go sidewalk layer only. Oh, and you know what I may have done is created, in fact, I think I did. I think I created a whole series of, okay, I'm going to go to all classes and see if it'll actually bring up these other things. And it didn't. But I thought I created a whole series of curb-like objects and put them in a class to not render so that the back of curb face of this sidewalk would hit a particular elevations. And again, I probably do have that in this file, but I'm not able to bring it up on command. And I think it would be way too boring for y'all to watch me hunt and peck and try to find it. But I believe that's what I did. So I was able to just get the curb where I needed it. And then I was able to then concentrate on what I needed to do at the upper extent of the these particular hardscapes. So this one right here needed to land right at the entry door to the falk. So it was a very particular elevation. And I probably had a false element of in an invisible class for that also, for the elevation of that floor plate. And that is basically how it was done. And I think you can kind of do anything if you with this, if you you know, it's a little bit of experimentation, and but the tool is pretty darn good, I think. Anyway, anything else?
Thanks, Al.
Hearing
This is
nothing.
really great. Really,
Hearing nothing from the field.
really appreciate your showing all this, and I think you've abundantly demonstrated that even without using all of its features, it's a pretty powerful tool. You know, just as a design tool, and if you want to use it as a documentation tool, you can go nuts and put in gravel.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yes, and documentation would be helpful too. But the main thing about this project was, and let me get the whole. Let me see if I can get everything in there. All layers. Was I really didn't have any confidence in what would happen with these ramps, and you can barely see it because the light is so intense here. I think I have a lot of, I am going to go ahead and let me see if turning this off helps. It didn't really help. This ramp, I didn't have enough confidence in knowing that if I move the ramp back this way, as opposed to the way it is today, which it moves out toward the sidewalk and at the street. But if I reversed it, moved it back, would the ramp, what would it do when it, what would the plaza need to do to make the ramp work? And so it really was helpful in being able to work out the particulars and have confidence that this design actually will work. And this is a complicated little thing. So anyway.
Al?
Yes, who's that?
It's
Is
Gail.
that Gail? Oh, hey, Gail. Yeah.
I just want to thank you for doing this and for giving me the impetus to investigate this tool, which I have not done. So thank you.
Sure, sure. And by the way, there's another feature of this tool, and I say this to Gail because I say this to Gail frequently, and as frequently as we talk, which is not all that often. But another feature of this tool available to Austin Vectorworks user group members only is that if there's anything about this that is helpful to you, but you can't quite remember what it is I did, feel free to call me and I'll be glad to walk you through what I can remember about what I did, which is sometimes tricky, but at any rate, thank you, Gail. Thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it.
All right, well, thank you so much, Al. Unless somebody else has something burning, let's wrap it up and we'll convene at this very same location again next month, I strongly suspect.
Thanks, Al.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Al.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.